Well, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started because I know we're at the last session of the day and everybody wants to prepare for the Savvies tonight. My name is Jamie Zwilling, and I'm the Communications and Marketing Coordinator for the City of St. Louis Park, Minnesota. So on behalf of the Planning Committee, I'd like to again welcome you all here. I hope everybody's having a great time in Minneapolis and continue to have a great time this evening and tomorrow as well. Very excited to bring this presentation to folks today, Designing with a Mobile First Mentality. I think as everybody knows here, our mobile devices is kind of where it's at now and where people are getting the most content quickest, and during crises and everyday life, that's where people are turning first, is to mobile first devices. So we have a couple of great speakers today. I'm just going to read a couple of introductions. On the far side of the table here today, we have Dan Moriarty. Dan is the Creative Director for Electric Citizen. Dan has been serving the Minneapolis-St. Paul area as a web designer, developer, and consultant since 2000, working with clients such as the University of Minnesota, American Swedish Institute, and St. Paul Public Library. He is founder and creative director of Electric Citizen. That's at electriccitizen.com. Dan manages information architecture, design, and development in the Drupal content management system. And as an active member of the Twin Cities community, Dan is also chief organizer for the regional Drupal camp Twin Cities. Our second speaker is Jason Huber. Jason first built a website in 1998 in the bad old days of dial-up internet. As a web developer, Jason has spent the last 16 years developing software and websites in open source for his company Simply Works Consulting and for the City of St. Louis Park, Minnesota, where today he serves as the technology and web coordinator. He was instrumental in promoting the convergence of technology and communications when St. Louis Park formed its Information Resources Department in 2006. And since that time, his work has been recognized by 3CMA, the National Association of Government Web Professionals, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, the Minnesota Association of Government Communicators, and the University of Minnesota. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jason. He's going to give a presentation, then Dan will give his presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions at the end. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm going to start out with getting kind of numbers and stats that we're seeing for mobile traffic, and then Dan's going to get more into the design aspect. So do you have a mobile device with you today? Anyone have 2 with them today? Anyone have 3 with them? They got their work one? Anyone still got their old BlackBerry because they like the full keyboard still? Anyone? Today this is becoming a rhetorical question. There's 7.2 billion people on the planet, and there's 6.9 billion mobile subscriptions out there. That works out to be about 96% of the world's population. If we look at just in America, 90% of Americans have a cell phone. 58% of American adults have a smartphone. 58%, you're thinking, well, it's just over half. But compare that with laptop computers, only 61% own laptop computers. And desktop computers, you can't even find a stat on that unless it's in a business. 42% of American adults own tablets. Let's talk about how attached we've become to these devices. Within 15 minutes of waking up, 80% of the people, 80% of the users check their smartphones. So the other 20% are lying. We know that. 91% of adults have their mobile phone within reach 24/7. 61% of users said they would unlikely return to a site if they had trouble viewing it in a mobile platform. And this is the one that kind of starting this year kind of makes you pause for a minute. 34% of Americans say they use only their mobile device to access the internet or as their primary source. Starting this year, mobile tablet took over internet traffic. 55% of all traffic comes from mobile devices on the internet now. And now I'll take a few minutes and switch into stats from our city. Like Jamie said, from the city of St. Louis Park. We're a first-ring suburb of Minneapolis, just like St. Paul, but smaller. Our population's about 46,000 or so. Received just under 500,000 hits last year. We launched responsive design back in June of 2012. That now needs to be updated again. If we look at the type of mobile devices that visit our site, Back in 2011, that was 47 different types of mobile devices. 2012, that came up to 89. 2013, we saw a significant jump to 216 types of devices. 2014, 335 types, and this is for the month of January. I pulled the statistics for each month. And I just pulled the statistics for last month for this presentation. 464 different types of devices visit the city website. Types would be anything from different types of iPhones to a Kindle to e-readers to your iPads. I mean, any of those types. Even your gaming systems that let you surf the web, internet, TVs, all those types of devices. If we look at desktop versus mobile, we go back to 2009. It was 1.4% of our traffic to the website was mobile. 2010, it was 3.9% of our traffic. In 2011, it was 10%. And we started looking at we need to kind of address how our site worked in the mobile space. 2012, doubled, 20% of our traffic. 2013, we had a good jump up to almost 36% or 35% of our traffic. And year to date, we're at 42% of our traffic is coming from mobile devices. So this session is on design mobile first, and you would think, well, desktop's still 58%, mobile's coming, but why would we design mobile first? Back in June of 2013, June 22nd, 2013, we had straight line winds and a storm roll through our city on a Saturday, of course, and knocked out power, knocked down trees, caused quite a bit of damage. If I pull the stats from that day, 67% was mobile, coming to look for information. And that stat, you would think, well, that makes sense. The power is out. How else were they going to get to our website besides using their mobile device? Well, on the 4th of July, we always do a big fireworks display in the city. And as my 14-year-old would say, the weather was kind of sketchy that day. So when you pull the stats for the 4th of July, again, 60% was mobile, coming to see if the fireworks were going to be on display. So when the information is critical, it's accessed via mobile device, is what the stats are showing. So in a community emergency, in crisis communications, you have to ask yourself, what is a visitor going to see if they visit your website on a mobile device? Are they going to see a nice clean list of contents? Maybe a map with charging stations that they can go to during the crisis. A place for Wi-Fi hotspots as cell towers become overwhelmed. Places to get connected. For years, we always thought of mobile as being on the run. We're going to build a small mobile site. We know what they need. We know what they're looking for. You really got to rethink your mobile paradigm. Mobile has really become this. Think about it in your own lives. Sitting at home, if you're trying to find information or look for something, you don't jump up and grab the laptop or run over to the desktop computer. You just grab your iPhone or your mobile device and look it up. So at the city, we've always worked to be web centric, and as we're moving forward, we're really looking to be mobile centric moving forward, to design mobile first out towards the web and build our platform that way. That's it. Time for Dan to take over.
I understand that we're going against 60 zany ideas, so I'll try and get a little zany here. $61 zany ideas. How many have you given so far?
At least
10, all right. 51 to go. Okay, so I'm going to talk about designing for mobile first. As mentioned earlier, I'm with Electric Citizen. We are a local web design and development shop. We specialize in working with the civic sector, working with schools, universities, museums, libraries, and cities. For those who tweet, and I do occasionally, I'm Minneapolis Dan on the Twitters. So the first thing I could ask is, well, what does this term mobile first mean? And I could ask you guys, does that mean anything to you? Have you heard the term before? A few nods, shows of hands. Kind of anyone want to give a shot at defining what that means? So designing clean on mobile to make that your priority. So we said, yeah. That is a good explanation. I think in addition to that, it means that you start building a new website or redesign at the lowest, not the lowest level, that makes it sound like mobile is bad, at the smallest common denominator. You're starting here and not here, and that's a big shift from our short history of web design of, 10, 12, 15 years, was constantly measuring where we were at in terms of what screen sizes people were using, what was their resolution, and adapting to that, and building everything, kind of taking it from the page or the magazine, the print design, popping it on a desktop. Suddenly we're on a tiny device that can change in size from user to user, and it can be a small mobile device, a tablet. The challenge with this approach, of course, is you have to fit all this information that you want to share on your website into this tiny device, potentially. And that's to start with. Of course, the bigger the screen, the more you can share, but if you start with this, the question is why. It sounds cool to be mobile first, but why would anyone bother when you've got many people still using desktops? Well, I think Jason just made the case that mobile users are no longer a tiny minority. They're soon to be the majority. And an excellent point that he also made is even people who own desktops will frequently rely on their mobile device. So things have changed, but it's more than that. A great book that you could check out, it's a couple years old now, but it's still relevant, called Mobile First by Luke Grabowski, Going Mobile First. And he lays out 3 key points that he, for his reasoning. One is future-proof, preparing you and your organization for the explosive growth and new opportunities emerging on mobile today. The second point is one that might not have occurred to a lot of people. It's a new focus. It forces you to focus your message and your priorities by embracing the constraints built into mobile design. And then the last one is new capabilities. If you start mobile first, you start thinking in terms of what can your site do or share that isn't possible on a desktop. Things like location-aware devices is one great example, especially for people working with cities and counties. I would imagine that could be a useful tool to add to your website, and it would maybe inform some of your content decisions and development as you build your site. So it's time for a mind shift. That's how I always describe this, is moving away from thinking desktop first to mobile first. You have to start thinking small, simple. We need to think fast and focused. And what I mean by that is you have to really consider your page weight, the performance, the download speeds of your site. You have to think focused in terms of your message. There isn't a lot of room on a device this size. So every inch of real estate has to be dedicated to your primary message. So where do you begin? There have been 3 approaches to the mobile opportunity or problem so far. The first one is apps. That's creating a dedicated app. The second one is a mobile-only website. And the third is responsive web design. And I'm going to talk about each of these approaches briefly and explore each one. And then afterwards, I'll tell you why none of these approaches get at some of the fundamental issues and what we need to do about that. So a little history lesson. The first approach is create an app. And is there anyone here whose organization has an app? Some of you? What kind of app do you have? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's so it's a dedicated app for pothole reporting, or any. Is it location aware? So if I take, okay, that's great. Yeah, did someone else raise their hand? Same thing. People hate potholes. Streetlights. Here in the Twin Cities, I think potholes would probably be number 1, but. Okay, so that's great. You know, and why an app for anything? There's several reasons. One is hardware integration, designed to work with your iPhone or Android device. Take advantage of the hardware built into those devices. You can access other apps on your phone, such as the camera, in that case of the reporting tool. Might access your address book. The GPS, as I mentioned, a lot of potential uses for that. And there's some visibility by having your app on someone's phone. They're flipping through, looking, wondering what to look at. There's your app. So I think in the example cited, that was a perfect way to use the app. Specific use cases. I think the problem, or what, not the problem, with any kind of use of an app, you're going to still need a mobile site. And the reason for that is your users. They still are searching online for information. They want to find it. They might even want to print it. I don't know why, but some people print. Just kidding. And they might share the data with friends on Facebook or Twitter, or they might email it. And information can be kind of locked in on an app. So that's one reason. And there's cost, of course, too, to developing custom apps. And here's a quote from Luke Grabowski about why an app isn't enough. I don't know if I need to convince you of this, but it is something that I've thought about. Could you just build an app for your city or your county and be done with it? But whether it's through search, email, social networks, or on the web pages, if you have content online, people will find and share links. So you need a mobile solution so that people can do that. So the second approach is the mobile-only site. If you've seen the HTTP or M dot something, have that reversed. Anyone here have a dedicated mobile site for your organization? Are you all familiar with what I'm talking about? You've seen those before. So, put my notes here. The example I was going to use with that, we just had our state fair here in Minnesota. And one of the things that you can download and use, which I did, was this app, dedicated app for some key elements of the fair: food, shopping, entertainment. But they also had a mobile version of their site, and it looked like this. And I wondered, this is in some ways your typical dedicated mobile site, at least not everywhere. They can be more than this, but a lot of times you get just a bare bones version of your site with a few key links. It's quick to download. It's quick to browse. It's short and concise. But I think users are missing something with these dedicated mobile sites. And if you were to go to the fair website itself, there's so much information here, and I understand why you would want to not throw a huge download at your users on a mobile device, but the problem with hiding some of this information from your users is, well, a couple of things. Number one, some of your users don't even have a desktop anymore. All they have is a mobile device. What are they going to do if they can't get access to all the content? You know, users don't want a crippled version of your site. They want all the same data that everyone else is getting on the desktop. The challenge, of course, is how to present that and get that to them on a mobile device. But I think that knowing your user base, there's going to be a need for more than just a shortened version of your site. So the approach number 3 is responsive web design. Is there anyone here who has not heard the term responsive web design or not sure what it is about? Everyone's kind of familiar with it? Excuse me. Keep track of my time here. Okay. So it's been a buzzword for several years now. I'd say the buzz is still going. It's, in a nutshell, it's taking a website. You all seem to understand this, but taking a website, there's an example of Smashing Magazine. There's that on desktop. On a tablet, it changes the layout, changes some elements in size and positioning down to a mobile location. I think that responsive design is so popular, in many ways it's sort of becoming a default for all websites going forward. A common quote I've heard over the past few years is, at some point, we won't even think of it as a responsive design. It'll just be web design. It started with this book by Ethan Marcotte, who Responsive Web Design also came out several years ago, talking about, he basically gave a name to what some people were already trying to do, which was take one site and through flexing and stretching, make it accommodate all different device sizes. You know, what makes responsive web design so popular? It's one site to manage all your devices and browsers. There's a low barrier to entry, and it's cost effective. I'll ask again, does anyone's organization's website have responsive design here today? So it's a bunch of you? Okay, so it's definitely making inroads. If you have a large existing site, it can be a little more difficult to adapt that into a responsive design. It can be done. It's typically, at least our approach would be to not only add that responsiveness, but at the same time look at reorganizing your content and design at the same point. They seem to go hand in hand. It's a good time to investigate all that. So responsive web design, is there any bad? More than just stretching and pulling, sites that aren't optimized can be slow to load for mobile users. Content that isn't optimized for the web and responsive design can make for a bad user experience. So if you just take an existing site that's huge and full and wordy and full of large images and just squish it down to a mobile device, that's not going to be enough. So I don't know if that's a fault of responsive web design, but it definitely is something you need to be aware of when you get into that approach. So those are the 3 main approaches that we have to a mobile-friendly website or a mobile-first website: the app, the dedicated mobile site, and responsive web design. I think what I'm trying to say, and I'll demonstrate this in a little bit, is that with a desktop device, there's an assumption that people are looking at that on a fairly robust network, so that if you want to put an image there that's full screen, for example, most people can download that on their desktop just fine. If you squish that down, you can do responsive techniques to make it fit just fine on this, but if it's the same large image, people are still having to download the larger image, and bandwidth is really key on a smaller device. So without any consideration of of speed when you squish your site down to a mobile device, I guess that's where you can get into trouble. So those things are great. Those are just techniques, though. But I want to argue that being mobile first is much more than just technique. It's again this mind shift, getting down to a more fundamental level. For mobile first design, not only are we starting all our designs from the smallest possible screen, we are rethinking content, rethinking presentation, and we need to rethink performance. So this is a little magic equation that I came up with. And the equation is content plus presentation. It's actually supposed to be plus performance. I was doing a dry run of this last night at home, and I was told to change that to a multiply. But I think I'm going to stick with plus. I'm going to fix that. Plus performance equals mobile first. So let's start with content. And those are your words, blocks, images, menus, everything that makes up content on your website. Okay? So desktop sites can be crammed full of information. And I think this is true in any organization. I don't know if it's more so when you get into cities and counties, but there are a lot of different interests in a lot of different departments, and everyone wants a spot on the homepage. I think that's probably universally true, but I've seen it in many different areas. You're trying to speak to every potential audience and use all the available real estate. And it's a worthwhile goal, but when you only have 320 pixels, which is, 3-4 inches to work with, that won't work. So you have to go with a more minimal approach. But what do? Do you cut valuable content, or do you remove all graphics or images? These are the kind of conversations you start to need having. Is mobile first forces content into focus. You need to find that key message. You have to keep it really simple, find the top priorities for your users, and you have to remove any fluff. So I thought one thing that would be fun to do is try and experiment taking an existing website that didn't have a mobile first approach, didn't have a responsive design or a mobile version site as far as I know, and try to do a quick rework of that. And so I found this site, city of Virginia Beach, Virginia, and I think it's a pretty nice looking site, actually. I didn't come across it because I didn't like it, but I did come across it and think, what would happen if we were to take this same site and redo it mobile first? I'm assuming that out of our little crowd here, no one's from Virginia Beach, but if you are, you could come up here and join me. So here we go. So I took the site. There it is when we force that into that default iPhone 320 pixel width. So we have some work to do right off the bat. So step one, I cut this site's different elements of content into pieces and started rearranging it on the page. And you can see it gets pretty darn long. On the left there is it's all one scroll, but I had to split it up to fit on the screen. One of the first steps I did in version 1 here, if I go back, you'll notice that under the towards the middle of the page, they've got a series of tabbed content: calendar, media, news, services. So one of the first steps I did was to change that to vertical tabs. And what vertical tabs are is you can see or get the idea, hopefully, from this mock-up. On the left-hand column, we've got news. That content's exposed, and then underneath that are a series of additional tabs for calendar and media. The idea was that you would click each of those, and that would reveal additional content. So that's one way to make that fit a little better. In version 2, I did something where replacing the main navigation bar, which won't fit, with this little menu icon. I'll touch briefly on that in a little bit, but basically the menu is now hidden. The search bar is a line next to it. Figured that was still a crucial component of the site. Any other changes I made here? I made the footer navigation fit in that width. Then in version 3, I did some more significant changes. I removed the tagline under the logo because it was so small, it was never going to show for anyone on a mobile device. No one's going to read it. That's the kind of decision. Yes, a tagline's important, but maybe on a mobile device, that's something we could throw out. I removed the secondary navigation that was up at the top. Maybe we could somehow fold that into the new hidden navigation bar. Shorten the content, the teaser text for that news item. I don't think users have time or the will to want to read a whole paragraph unless they're truly interested. They can click through and read the whole thing, but at a quick scan, let's not distract them with too much information. Another decision I thought I would make is taking services and move that to the top of my tabs over news, with the idea that let's think about the content that our users want. Maybe the first thing they want to know is what services are available. They want to do something. If they want to find out news, let's give them that option, but perhaps that's not the primary purpose of their visit. And that's the kind of thing you can bear out in your planning and discovery phase of any website redesign, is what your users are looking for. I'm making that assumption on my gut and also on some studies on a current website I'm doing for a city. For the fourth change, really simplifying, we've got it down to fitting in one column here on the left. On the right, that's just a little annotation of what I've been changing. Renaming services to most popular services, removing that carousel. I added a direct text link for social media that would lead to a page that had all of them, because I think those little icons are great, but no one's going to be able to click on an individual one on a mobile phone. And I simplified the footer. I think some of these links don't need to be repeated so much, so this is what I end up with. This is our reworked mock-up of a website, mobile first. And the next question I asked is, okay, let's pretend that we redesign this website from a mobile first perspective. So that's all we have now is this. So now we're going to take what we have as our key elements and enhance it and expand it for a desktop. So what would that look like? So here what I've done is I've still got a main feature item. I've got a short teaser headline underneath it. I've slid the most popular service links up to the upper right so they're front and center. You can still access news and media links, but they're just smaller secondary links now. And then I cut back on a few of the little widgets on the page, picking maybe 4 key ones. Even that, you could determine what was key or what wasn't. So it ends up looking something like that. So there's the current site on the left, and this is just a quick mock-up of what it could look like on the right. And, you know, is it better or is it worse? I don't know. That's certainly up for discussion. This wasn't a full planned process. This was just a quick mock-up, but I think, at least for myself, I feel a little more ease in engaging with the site on the right now and finding some quick information, and I don't feel as overwhelmed by my choices. So that was mostly content, which is the first page, first in our equation. By cutting down on the amount of content on the home page, we made it fit more comfortably, and at the same time gave the page a tighter focus, possibly improved on site usability as well. So what's next? The second item is presentation. You could also call it the design. So in our first process of content, we did make some presentation changes. It was inevitable that the two fields sort of intertwine. We did change the main navigation. We separated the search bar. We switched to vertical tabs. We used some drop-down menus. So there was some presentation changes. But from overall, I did keep the overall design intact. And were this to be a full redesign, I would start looking at ways to embrace everything that mobile brings and let that inform my design decisions. And I would say that design is changing everywhere now because of mobile first. One small example is the hamburger icon. Is everyone familiar with that being called the hamburger icon? I don't know who decided that would be a hamburger. It could be just a sandwich, but it's become the standard icon for hidden menus in navigation, and you see it all the time on your apps and on any website you're looking at that's responsive on your mobile device. But so that started with mobile, and you could argue that this isn't quite ubiquitous enough that everyone understands what it means, but we are getting to that point where it's becoming a universal symbol. But that's translating into larger design decisions. I just grabbed a random site off of a gallery of new web designs. And if you look at this magazine site, a lot of sites are starting to make this decision where they don't even show the menu on the desktop version. In the upper left, you see the little icon. That clicking that will reveal the full list of choices, but they have pared down the list of items to just 4 centered categories. They've also made the choice to hide the search icon. These are decisions you make initially because of real estate on a phone, but it's starting to translate to websites everywhere. Some of the other design decisions you'll see is this trend to center everything. You'll notice that in the upper right there, they have a column, a right-hand column. There's some ads in it. On a lot of websites, typical up to this point, you might put like a sidebar navigation there. When you go mobile first, you quickly realize, oh my gosh, there is no sidebar. And so you start thinking, what other solutions can I come up with so that we don't end up with the awkward experience of someone coming to this website on a mobile device and they're on an interior page and they want to navigate somewhere, and that sidebar ends up pushed all the way to the bottom. Or maybe just as worse, it's at the top and then people have to scroll past it to see the content. So you start to see the sidebar becomes more of a luxury than something that you want to rely on for your design across all devices. You also see a lot of full width images, wide bars of content like you would see on the right of this magazine site. I think when you're scrolling through a phone, those wide edge-to-edge bars of content do really nice to separate the content as you're flipping through, so it feels like you're entering a new section. So you see that a lot on mobile devices. It's translating into design everywhere. I think I covered most of those. One of the other things, and this is maybe a little difficult to talk about in a minute, but this idea of your source order of content. What this refers to is you have these, think of your web page as having these different blocks of content, right? You've got your header, you got your main content area, you might have a sidebar. And when you take that to a mobile device, there are no more sidebar columns. These all get squished into one stack of content. And that's fine, but if you start mobile first, you can easily see, okay, this is the hierarchy I want to set for each page in my site because I only have one column to work with. When you start desktop first, you might think you have the perfect layout, and then you squish everything, and suddenly a key piece of your content is by design being forced to the bottom of the page. So the order you put your content in on a mobile device, mobile first, will help as you expand into a desktop. So the third equation in mobile first performance, it's about speed. As I alluded to earlier, if you take a desktop first site and simply shrink it down, it's going to be too heavy. According to a study last year, the average page size is now 1.7 megabytes, which in one way, it's like big deal. We have terabyte drives now. Who cares? But it was kind of shocking to me. I know that the goal at one point was 50, 60K. That's way past that. And when you're on a nice 5G network or super fiber optic network, it doesn't matter, right? But people are on all sorts of devices. They're in all sorts of situations. They don't always get a good connection. I, for one, certainly find that to be true. Maybe another statistic I could share with you is this idea of download time. People, last I heard, people were being very impatient. It was something like 4 or 5 seconds. If the page didn't load, they were going to abandon your website. If you take that to a mobile device level, some of the statistics are, if that doesn't load in 1 to 2 seconds, they're gone. And you're going to lose a lot of users if your site's not loading quickly. Images are the number one culprit in download times. And as far as what we can do about that, I don't want to suggest that we get rid of images on websites. I think they make everything so much better to have that graphic element. But there are a few things we can do. This is also, just to note, still a somewhat new area that's being explored. There aren't any definitive solutions at this point, but I make it my job to keep up on where this is headed. And I think that there is a solution that's been put out there that is becoming more and more viable, just so you're aware. It's something called the picture element. What this is just been accepted, I believe, by the newest version of Google Chrome. Firefox and Safari will be next. I don't know about Internet Explorer. Hopefully they will also join in on this. What this is in a nutshell is serving up different size images to your user based on the device size. And it's not taking one single image and squishing it down, which you can do today. It's actually has the choice of these smaller file size, bigger file size on the server, and it will grab the appropriate one. Now, this can be a big pain in the butt if you're hand coding all this on a large site. On a small site, you can get away with it. If you can work with a content management system, I work with Drupal. I know that there's some integration in that content management system for the picture element. I believe that WordPress has that as well now. And that's something to become aware of as more and more people are using websites, mobile. Let's think about how it can improve performance. Some other performance boosters, of course, are minimized script libraries. There's a lot of scripts that websites use these days. There's different techniques and choices to be made there. This can get a little technical, so I'm not going to get into a lot of details here, but just to point out, there can be content delivery networks. There's even free ones that will allow you to serve up web pages faster to your users, depending on their location, and replacing some images with font icons. One of the things you want to avoid is having, if you have 30 different elements on a page, each time someone visits that page, the server has to go out and call for each piece, and that adds to your download time. So using something called sprites, you combine all your images in one file and then can style it just to show certain ones in different areas on the page. That'll also cut down on download time. So that's the magic equation. Content plus presentation plus performance is mobile first. Is that everything? Probably not. Oops, I was trying to get my notes here. I just lost them, but I haven't needed them so far. So I just thought I'd show you one more gross image of a brain. It's a mind shift going mobile first, but I think the benefits are great. I think if you're looking to redo your site, if you're starting a new site, try going mobile first. Any questions?
So the question was really, if you're thinking mobile first, do we need to start writing differently if we're going to present it, or if we're going to have a responsive design, should it still be a larger, longer article, and so forth? So you guys want to take a crack at answering how we can write differently so we can present best mobile first?
Sure. Did you want to start?
Well, you can on your on the mobile site have the shorter version. As you go to the desktop one, have the full one. On the mobile site, you could have a read more type link that expands and shows the rest of that. There's a couple ways I've tackled that.
I think if you have one site and you're going with a responsive approach, you do take time to re-examine all your content. We suggest for any kind of redesign of a website, go through everything, scrub it down, trim it down, pare it down. Give people short, quick choices on initial pages, landing pages. If someone wants to dig in deeper, that's when you give them the full paragraph after paragraph of information.
Any additional questions? So the question here is, new site launched, and they had a good debate, good healthy debate, right, over how big should that search box be? Should we make it large or should we make it small? Because aren't we really living in a Google world where everybody's searching and maybe navigation isn't as important? So if you guys could answer that, how important is navigation, and is this a trend maybe, this move to the larger search box?
I'm curious what's the city or county that's for? Okay. I think your instincts are good for the making search a key component of that homepage. I think that speaks to a chunk of your audience. They're coming to find something, and that's one way to find it. What you'll find, though, is that users end up in dividing themselves. It might be just human nature into two camps. There are people who like to search for things, and there are people who like to drill down for things. And I actually am in the second camp. I know I can search for something, but a lot of times I'll find myself browsing through different hierarchy of menus to try and find information. So that's definitely still going to be a big part of your user base is going to want to navigate that way. And the other half is going to want to search. And search is great if it's successful. And what I mean is a lot of websites and content systems, content management systems don't always do a great job at searching content out of the box that Google can do better, for example. So if you're going to have search on your website, look into some ways to amp up what you get by default. Oh, yeah, that's great.
I think the only thing I would add is looking at our analytics for our city site, we're down to about 18% coming through the homepage. But we've had a campaign over the years to create landing pages based on our Google results. So example, if you search St. Louis Park Police, you're going to hit an inside page that looks like a home page for fire, and we do that for a lot of our main pages and departments, just because less and less people are even coming to our homepage. So it helps you when people are arguing about they want their stuff on the homepage, and I just said, well, we'll get 18% of the people if we do that. So we always try to drive everything by our analytics.
Yeah, that's a great point. I forget about that. Not everyone enters through the front door.
Any other questions? Okay, well, I know it's the end of the day. If you do have questions, I'm sure these guys will hang out for a few minutes. We hope to see everybody at the Savvies tonight. It's just about a block away at the Music Box Theater. There'll be people downstairs just before 5:30 leading the way. So let's thank Dan and Jason for their great presentation.